to kind of come full circle from the beginnings of this course when we read part of the book Demystifying Disability by Emily Ladau and watched the documentary Crip Camp in order to give us a history of advocacy behind individuals with disabilities and the core of special education. It's important to bring that back around and think about advocacy as one of our professional responsibilities. Whether or not you think or believe or see yourself as an obvious advocate, that just comes with the territory of working in special education. We advocate every day in classrooms, hallways, communities, homes, meetings, and even on Zoom meetings to make sure that our students with disabilities have access, have high quality education, and are truly belong in all of the spaces where their peers do. So it makes sense to think about that as part of your profession and your professional growth. We'll dig into that a little bit more when we consider all of the organizations that are available to support special educators and general educators, anybody who works with a student with a disability. But I think it's also important to really take a deep look at this point in our semester at being an ally and being an advocate. I am going to go back to our Emily Ladau book. If this is not a book that you own, it's not very long. It is worth checking out. It's available at our Grand Valley Library, most public libraries, and it is a pretty quick read. I know that you're overwhelmed with reading, but it's a good one to read, even for your enjoyment and your professional growth. I want to read specifically from page 142 towards the end of this book, in which an activist who also has autism, named Rima McCoy, drops a hard-hitting question. And she asks, if you do not belong to a particular marginalized community and you want to help that community, why do you associate the word help with that community? That's less of a challenge question than it is a question to examine our perspectives as we learn more about being a professional special education staff member or instructor and really look within ourselves. It's important, and Emily Ladau has kind of keyed the term, important to consider being an ally and really examining what allyship means. Are we an ally because we believe that the students with disabilities in our profession and in our care need help? Are we really coming from the charity model and looking at them as someone or persons to feel sorry for? Or can we stretch and really become allies and advocates? I'm going to read one more piece from that same chapter in which the same activist, Rima McCoy, talks about being an ally. To be an ally is to help people who are marginalized in some capacity to make the most of their life in an unchanged system. But to be an accomplice, on the other hand, is to work side by side with people who are marginalized to confront the system and contribute to shifting it accordingly. And I challenge you with that quote to really think about how we can have maybe a foot in both roles, to be both an ally and an accomplice. And I think about those famous quotes from John Lewis, who was a famous Southern politician, and talked about how we need to make good trouble as we are maybe accomplices for our students and individuals with disabilities in our community. The most important part of that is another very famous statement that has become so universal in special education that, to be honest with you, I'm not sure if it's real or the origin story, but we're working very hard to make sure that even though we're professionally trained as teachers, we start to consider that we do nothing about individuals with disabilities without individuals with disabilities. that keys into the self-determination and the transition plans and the parts of our law for young adults to assure young adults with disabilities have a meaningful role in the decisions that are made about their lives. But it also keys into that advocacy piece, making sure we are both allies and accomplices as special education professionals. We need to think about how and when we advocate, and the fact that it is a journey, maybe not a destination, that we're always growing and learning. I want to share a little bit more about my professional experience when it comes to advocacy, and you'll learn a little bit more in a couple of slides as we explore professional organizations. But I sit on the board for Michigan Council for Exceptional Children as the CAN coordinator. That stands for Children Action Network. And what it really means is that I'm the chair for legal advocacy in the state of Michigan in our professional organization. I work very closely with people in Lansing for our state laws and regulations governing special education, but also in Washington, D.C. for our federal requirements that we've talked all about this semester. I enjoy it. It's something I'm very passionate about. But at the same time, I continue to learn and grow and make sure that I am advocating for special education professionals and the educational experience that our students with disabilities have. I'm very careful not to advocate for the rights of people with disabilities without them. And I don't think there's any better way to kind of reflect on that than to think about the one short chapter I had you read from this book, but also the documentary that we watched earlier, Crip Camp, about really how that advocacy grew and how special education and the laws that protect our students grew from there. I think it's important to always consider the perspectives that we may be missing. And that's important when it comes to including students in schools with the decisions that are being made for and about them, and in our communities also. On that note, it's important that we keep learning, and I've included the Journeys of Empowerment video. It's about a 17 to 18 minute video to really help us think about being an ally and an accomplice, but not through a charity model perspective. I want to include the voice of people with disabilities, kind of coming again full circle, not as a source of information, but to make sure it's really key in our minds that as we're learning about the education of people with disabilities, we're also learning from people with disabilities. So this video is embedded on the next slide, but also in your Blackboard module for this week. Enjoy and consider as we wrap up with our assignments for this week and as we wrap up for the semester.